Hello and welcome to a new episode of Pat's Chat. Today I'm with Roshan Thiran. He's the founder of Leaderonomics. Hi Roshan, how are you today?
Very good, very good. Stuck here at home, as you can see, we are on lockdown in Malaysia, so no leaving the house, right?
Still ongoing 4 weeks now, I think.
Yeah, I think it's 5 weeks, right? I think it's going to be our
5 weeks.
next week.
So fast. Yeah, thank you very much, both for joining me. I know it's a busy time for your company also. I really appreciate that.
Busy, right?
Yeah, so let's go right in the discussion that we wanted to have. Above all, about leadership. I think that's the very important topic any days, but nowadays even more. First of all, I want to know a little bit about your past, and let's start with your bachelor degree. That was in international business, and you did that in Connecticut in US.
Yes, I was at University of Bridgeport. That's right. Yeah, so I actually got. It's where I met my wife. Actually, we were on the same flight going to the US, and we met on the plane. I think more interestingly, I got a scholarship actually to go there. And then when I was there, I actually ended up playing soccer for the university and doing it for my full couple of years. Ending up being the assistant captain. It was fantastic. We had a fantastic team, and we challenged for the NCAA and a number of other things. I mean, we were in our division, we started off not very strong team, and then we kept growing from leaps and bounds. And so I managed to continue my what do you call it? My love for sports in the US. With university, and then I also ended up becoming student congress president. So I led the student body in the university, and I started a newspaper there. So it was very interesting. And then at that point in time is where General Electric was at that. General Electric was also headquartered in Connecticut, and I think they had been reading about me in the papers. And in the US, the papers are very local. The Fairfield News and the Bridgeport Times and a whole bunch of other newspapers. I can't remember what they were, but I got an internship with GE, and somehow that translated. My boss liked me and offered me a job, and then after I finished my university, so I continued working while I was in university. And after I finished university, I got into GE's very exclusive leadership program. They call it the financial management program. So,
awesome.
So that's kind of how.
Oh, wait, give me a second. Give me a second here, because that was like a dozen of stories already. That's awesome. Yeah. So, besides you met your wife in the plane, that's already a funny story. But you got a scholarship for football, like soccer, they call it in US.
Well, it was combined. It was like academic also, because I had done relatively well. I ended up with a pretty solid. I was a 3.9 something GPA, I think, out of 4. So it was kind of like what we call the scholar athlete. You had a combination of everything. But it was good. I mean, having that, they paid for your food, they paid for your dorm, paid for your tuition fee, pretty much everything. Other than and whenever I worked, because I did work still, all that money belonged to me, right? No loans to pay and so on. So it worked out pretty nicely.
Wow, awesome. Really awesome.
It was given by the university. So it was a scholarship from the university, not from the government or from another body. Okay. It was actually from the university itself. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting because like soccer at that time in US was not so popular, right? So you must have been like a great player in Malaysia that they
I don't think I was. I think maybe it's like there was a perception that and probably nobody played it. In our team, very interestingly, in my team there was one American in the second year. In my first year there was absolutely no Americans. Right, there was one American player in the entire team. The rest were from Argentina, from Europe. I mean, we had a bunch of guys from Britain, from Sweden, from Poland. There was a really solid ex-national player actually from Poland, and then we had a couple of guys from Africa and South America, a couple. So it was a very nice,
international setup,
like a United Nation team. Yeah, everyone speaking all kinds of language. So we ended up having to speak English, so it was good.
Awesome. Okay, great. So you already mentioned you started with Exxon Mobile, the General Electrics also.
Yeah, I actually had I worked with Exxon before I went to GE, and that was because when I came to the US, I had this scholarship and everything, but I didn't have any money, right? So I ended up working in a petrol station, or what we call a gas station, an Exxon gas station. and I got promoted up to become the deputy manager of the station. And I ended up on payroll of Exxon, actually running this whole gas station, right? And at that point in time, I quit actually to take on the internship with GE. So I worked there for a couple of years actually with Exxon, but really hands-on, dirty, pumping petrol, running the station, getting up at 5 in the morning and opening up the station at 5:30, making coffee. And selling coffee, and it's about 6. All these Americans will run in to buy coffee and have their little fix for the day, and then saying good morning to everybody. And so it was so that Exxon was really a very operational role, running a gas station, literally.
Well, I think it's good to start with that, because you will always remember that, and how really the tough work also at the front end will what it means. And
yep, absolutely.
Okay, then let's move on to GE, and of course I can already understand the connection with GE and the then CEO, which was Jack Welch, right? Which is one of the most inspiring leaders anyway.
He was. Yeah. And scary, and very scary.
Oh yeah, why is that?
No, I mean Jack. Okay, so I joined GE in 94, 95. And when I came into GE, right, Jack had this reputation of, if he didn't like what he see, he'll be fired, right? I mean that so you kind of and I remember, my first interaction with him actually was when he came to Malaysia. So I had a couple, actually I had a couple of interactions with him in Fairfield when I was heading up the Y2K project. So I actually did a role where I was program manager for Y2K. So I had met him, but more, very superficially, kind of 2 minutes here, and you're kind of showing something. You're kind of the guy who's presenting a deck, but he really didn't care about Y2K. But when I took on the role in Malaysia, so in Malaysia I came in to run an aviation shop, and I came for a business review, and he started to grill you, tell me what's happening, what's happening in Malaysia business. And then, at the end of that review, he goes visit customers with you. And in that trip, he actually get rid of our Asia CEO, right? Because he doesn't like what happened during one of the meetings, right? Of course, it's written up in a very different way, right? It's written up in oh, okay, this guy has decided to part company. But, being there, I'm whoa, what just happened, right? You kind of get really scared. But at the same time, you're so inspired by the guy, because what he says, one of the things early on, I remember that he said was this, he said, face reality as it is, not how you like it, right? And so, I was just telling my team, COVID, right? Come on, face reality. No, everyone's telling me, no, in 2 months' time, everything will be fine. We're back to normal. Our revenue will be back again. So I'm come on, things are not going to be the same. People are, do you think you're going to have events, big events anymore? I don't think so, I think a lot of this will be scaled down significantly. It's going to impact my training business. It's going to impact our face-to-face business or our events business. And so there's a lot of impact, right? So we need to be realistically, we need to face reality, not how we like it, but how it is, right? And we need to then change and say, look, how do we do the same thing, but virtually? Because it's possible, right? It's possible to have virtual conferences and virtual summits and virtual training and virtual webinars, the stuff, and virtual conversations like the one we're having right now, right?
Yeah, have to, yeah.
Jack was inspiring because he will tell you the truth as it is, right? And I think sometimes, especially Asia, right, truth is very hard because we don't like feedback. Feedback is a painful thing, right? But if you look at what Jack tells you, right? Jack tells you feedback is good for you, because if you don't know what's wrong with you, how are you going to change, right? So you look at a guy, right, and he's like, the scary part is that truth is very painful, but at the same time you need truth to change, right? Because if not, it won't change. So I'm inspired. But as an employee, you're always scared, right? But then when I started saying, so what? What's the worst that can happen? He fires you. So what? Right? When in the olden days, when somebody gets fired from GE, it's like a badge of honor, and some company will take you on anyway. Back then, probably not now, but
just because you work for GE, right?
Yeah, I work for GE. It's like, okay, come work for me. Right?
Yeah, true.
I used to get offers all the time, right? So it wasn't. It was like, it was kind of so. What's the worst, right? And then you start to realize it's not a bad thing, right?
True.
And I think he built a tremendously interesting company. Yeah, but I had 7 years of Jack. And I had 7 years of Jeff, right, the new CEO. So GE was interesting for me. It was like, I had nine different roles in GE, right, over the 30 years that I was there. And from technology role with Y2K to mostly finance. I was CFO. Kind of a finance roles in a number of places. I was in NBC TV company. I was in aviation. which is jet. We kind of did GE's jet engines, the service. I was in the service. I was running a service shop, overhaul shop. I had a little bit of time in healthcare. I was in corporate. I was in G Capital for a bulk of my time. G Capital is a banking arm. So I was in Europe with G Capital. I was in US with G Capital. And then I was in Asia. I helped G Capital a little bit in the Thai business, and also in trying to look at acquisitions.
Awesome.
So there's a number of things that So to me, that was super rich experience, right?
I can understand.
We never really slept much, but the kind of I tell you, it's like everything I learned, I think I learned from GE, right?
Yeah, and you saw a lot of different fields and industries, if you want, right?
Yeah,
it's for sure an awesome experience.
It helped you be very agile, I think, which is what I learned. The agility is very important.
Okay, great. Then before you started Leaderonomics, you still worked for J&J, I think back in Malaysia at that time.
Well, actually, it was not in Malaysia. It's based in the US, but it was kind of a global role. But I convinced them that I will stay put in Malaysia. So I traveled from Malaysia to wherever I wanted to go to. But so J&J was going through this. They were at a point at that time. They were a very decentralized organization. I think they still are, and they wanted to centralize it a little bit. And so they brought me in as the global talent director. And global talent, in terms of looking at the talent globally, and how do you build hypo programs. I spent some time in Europe building the hypo program there. I went to India, to Japan, to a couple countries in Asia. I spent a lot of time in the US working on consolidating the succession planning program. A kind of a standard succession planning across the board, and also performance management. How do you standardize it across the board? So a lot of things that we did at GE, right? They liked, and they said, how do we standardize? Because J&J is very decentralized. And that's part of the magic. I like J&J. It's, to me, I love J&J. I mean, J&J was such a wonderful company because they had such heart, In GE, right, when I left GE, my boss was like, gave me a call and say, hey, all the best, whatever, boom, and you're gone, right? I was 14 years there. In J&J, right, when I told them I'm resigning and I wanted to, focus on this startup that I'm starting called Leaderonomics, they were like, come to China, let's organize a farewell. Come to US, let's organize a farewell. Come to India. And I'm like, I'm having farewell after farewell, and like, dude, I've been here 2 years and you guys are crying, and it's like we are family. I'm like, wow. It's like, but it's and what J&J gave me, I thought, was a completely different dimension, that actually decentralization works, right? Because what G taught me was that centralization works, but what J&J taught me was decentralization also works, right? And it also taught me new things, that when you are decentralized, leverage it. When you are centralized, leverage it. Because don't try to be imitating other people. So when J&J tried to, do this whole thing of trying to centralize, it didn't really work so well. Because the core DNA of a company, there's some what we call secret sauce that's baked in, and you need to understand your secret sauce and build on top of it, right?
I think it's the company's culture, right, which is so important. And then because in this huge corporates, you cannot simply change it, And I think that's as you said, the DNA. It's like that, and then it's that model that works best for that company.
But it's two tremendous companies. I mean, I have absolute respect for GE and J&J, and the lessons I learned from both of them. And I think very interestingly is also, if you really think about how they've evolved, I think J&J has done relatively well. GE is just gone, completely, out of the radar, right? I mean, completely blown up, right? So it's kind of sad to see, and GE is probably the oldest company, right, out there, to some extent on the Dow Jones, from Thomas Edison, right? I mean, its roots were from Thomas Edison, right?
Wow.
With light bulbs, right? General Electric was really it used to be Edison General Electric, I think it's what we used to call it, and then it became General Electric, right? So it's and this is a good warning for all of us, right? Even big companies can falter, right? So no matter how good and big and strong you are, you got to be vigilant, you got to be agile, you got to understand the environment, and you got to be aware, right? And face reality as it is, not as you think it is, or as you wish it is.
Yeah, it's a good saying. I love that, really. So as you mentioned, 2009, I think it was, you decided to start Leaderonomics. What motivated you to do that, or what was the trigger for you to start this company?
Yeah, so one of the things when I came back to Malaysia, and this was in '99 when I was running the aviation shop from Malaysia, I started to realize that there is a fundamental issue in Malaysians, right? So we seem to be very talented outside of Malaysia, but somehow in Malaysia we don't seem to be very talented, right? And we had this brain drain where the best used to go out, and what I realized is that actually the same Malaysian in Malaysia is talented. It's just that they don't have the self confidence. And there's some if you look at the leadership development, how leaders are developed, right? You learn a skill and then you practice it and then you become very good at it. But then for you to execute it well, you need to have self-confidence, right? Let's say I teach you how to ride a bike. You actually know how to ride a bike, but you have an accident and you feel I can't, right? Even though you have the skills to ride a bicycle, you won't ride a bicycle because you don't have the self-confidence. And we need to give you that self-confidence. And somehow in Malaysia, right, we've got a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm born in Malaysia. I can't compete with these Americans or these Europeans." Or, "Oh, come on, who are we? We're small. Yeah." No. And this seed, right, grows into a belief that stays for people for a long time, right? And so I said, look, part of leadership development is flawed in Malaysia. And so I started Leaderonomics, more of an NGO, right? Was to go to young people and say, how do we look at leadership development and say, look, there is a skill development part, which a lot of people do. We have a lot of education. But what about the confidence building part? How do I build confidence? And this is intentional, right? So I give you an example. One of the first things we did is run leadership camp. In 2008, in 2007, we started this, right? So we started leadership camps, and in the camp, right, we designed a camp for the campers, right, to get a project that is massive, right? And the first day they fail, the second day they fail, the third day they fail, but somehow on the fourth or fifth day, when they present to the CEO, right, they succeed, right? So what happens, right? They have this fail, succeed model where when they succeed, suddenly they realize, right, which is intentionally developed. So no matter how bad their thing is, the context we create, the CEOs get very excited, and ultimately they ultimately succeed, right? And so what happened is we intentionally develop self-confidence, right? And now they believe that they can be leaders, right? And so once you start believing, then you start saying, I can keep doing this, and then we give projects. We call that MAP projects, right? So we started as an NGO, but as time went on, companies like Microsoft and Sime Darby and Maxis and a couple other companies, right? They came to us and say, hey, we like what you're doing with the kids. Can you do that for our employees? Because they need it too. These guys can't execute, right? They can't, and so we started to take these gamified, scientifically designed modules, and we started to incorporate it in companies. But we did it slightly differently. We started to do it in a way that says, look, we don't want to do training. We want to do it based on your business strategy. So tell me your business strategy. We'll translate it into learning interventions so that we will build capacity that way. Right? So really Leaderonomics started as an NGO, but we grew into, and then when we did it for companies, we realized that, hey, maybe I don't need to fund this NGO thing myself. I can take the money that we get from the companies and use it to fund our community work. Mm-hmm. So that's how we started. But one thing led to another, and before long, we were one of the biggest corporate learning providers, in the country. Right?
Yeah, that's awesome. The development,
that's the story,
The development is really, really great over this 10 years. Also, like these 10 years ago, I read one of the early interviews that you gave. I think it was with Star Media, and I have an interesting quote there. I want to know about this a little bit more. The quote was. It was kind of self-assessment, right, that you did, and you said like, okay, my biggest weakness is that I cannot say no. So if you look at that in like 10 years ago, that was your biggest weakness. Would you say that is still your weakness today, or how did that change?
I think it's evolving, I think I've learned many times. I think a lot of it now is when it comes to business, right? Before this, and you start to understand the need to have clarity and focus. Right, and so when you have clarity and focus, you know how to say no. I think that's one of the important things I've learned, is that my problem is that when everything sounds exciting, everything is a yes, right? But when you have clarity and focus, then you know what is no and what is yes, right? And you know when you need to jump in and when you don't need to jump in, right? So I think that having that thought process to say, okay, what is yes and what is no is important, right? And what should I focus on? What shouldn't I focus on? So that has helped. But at the same time, I think it's still, if you see somebody and say, look, if there's an opportunity to help somebody, I think that's harder to say no. If there's an opportunity to help somebody, it's hard to say no, at least help them to find connect them with somebody, right? So Patrick, you come to me and say, okay, fine. Worst case, if I can't help you, I will connect you with somebody that may be able to help you, right?
Yeah.
So that's a way of saying no, but in a way that makes you feel a little bit better about the whole
It's
thing.
more like the delegating way of doing it, right?
Maybe, yeah. So, but I think the business side, I think it's solved. I think that one I'm pretty clear that we have to say no sometimes, and sometimes we say no to a customer, right? Because it's like, look, I want to focus on virtual transactions. I don't want all these traditional transactions. So sometimes we say no to traditional transactions, right? Even though it's nice money, but it doesn't make sense in the scheme of where what we're trying to do now.
I understand. Lots of learning. I see you have a tremendous amount of experience, especially of leadership. And before we talked already about Jack Welch, and what I can also recommend is the book that you wrote or you co-authored, Leadership Nuggets. You gave me a copy of that, like when we met the first time. I really appreciate that. There's some
and you can download it, and it's free. You can download it for free at Leaderonomics. Yeah, if you go to leaderonomics.com under our publications, you'll be able to pick it up.
That's great. I share the link later. Yeah. What impressed me most is like, Jack Welch wrote an article in there, and by the way, also John Maxwell, which I consider like my virtual mentor and my leadership coach, which I really admire. How did you manage to get these two above all these two to write?
Yeah. So if you go to leaderonomics.com, you'll see John Maxwell still writes for us. On a weekly or monthly basis. I think he still sends, whenever he writes, he sends his articles to us. We have Jack, who passed away recently, so we have all archive of all of his previous articles. So until he passed away, we were getting articles from him. We've got others too, Jeff Hayden and a bunch of others, right? And so even Simon Sinek, has contributed early days. He started contributing a lot of articles. So one of the things we started to do is that Leaderonomics.com is a free content site. Right, everything is free, right, including the books, right? When we do these things, so the book is just a compilation of a couple of really good articles, right? And we're doing another one relatively soon. And the idea is to give as much leadership content and make it accessible. See, when we started Leaderonomics, I told you we started with the NGO mindset, meaning I want to give, and over time, right, if there's opportunity for us to build partnerships where we can get something out of it, then that's great. But if we don't, we still want to give, right? And so those guys understand our model. They understand that we're not just, there's no commercialization. It's all free. And I mean, what we did was we just wrote to them, right? I mean, we literally wrote to these guys and said, would you like to write for us and check it out? And we'll publish you. We'll put it in a newspaper, because we used to run we have a digital magazine, and we also ran. We bought a few pages from the Star every week, and we used to publish it when print was sexy, not sexy anymore. So we stopped that. But previously we ran it in the Star. The digital magazine is still there. So, and these guys, they looked at what we did and they said, look, great, I'd like to be part of it, So we've got 200-300 writers, right, who contribute articles to us, and I think we are probably one of the best leadership sites, if not the best, I think, out here in Asia and potentially the world, right? I mean, our biggest readership is from the US. So I just saw the numbers today. Yesterday, 60,000 readers, just one day. I mean, yesterday.
That's really awesome, yeah.
It's pretty good, when we
that's great
when we have that kind of readership on a daily basis,
It's a fantastic achievement, I would say, and I'm really happy and proud to see that coming out of Malaysia. Congratulations on that. As you mentioned, just now you mentioned, like, okay, when printing was still sexy. So last few minutes we can spend on the digital and the digital transformation, because that's what is currently going on. And you just mentioned also before, like, companies missing this area, they will probably left behind. And over the last few weeks, you posted, or you offered for free, like, this webinars together with HRTF, I think, which I also had a look at a couple of them. Some were really good on self-development, the future readiness technologies. And when we talk about all this, the future technologies, or also the digital transformation, we also understand that the leadership in this digital age needs to change. So what is the changes that you see, and what is the recommendation that you give, like, specifically to the leadership in this for this area?
Yeah, so I think initially a lot of it is mindset. I think it's very tough where you you see, we a lot of people, including my own business, right, my own team, right, and I have, I'm having another conversation in a couple more minutes with my team. Is, there's going to be a phase where whenever you have a crisis, right, there's a denial, then there's anger, then there's bargaining. No, it's not. Come on, it's going to just be another 2 months. Don't worry. And then you get to a point of acceptance, right? And then reality kicks in, and you start to understand that, ooh, actually things are changing, and now you realize you're in a crisis and you need to fix yourself, right? So what happens in a lot of businesses, is that when we have a crisis like this, people say, "Oh, we go digital," but in their mind, it's superficial. Let's have Zoom calls. Let's have this. This is superficial digitization, right? Because it's not actual transactional digitization, right? Because when you start to see the transactions get digitized, then you're moving the needle, right? So what is superficial? Oh yeah, we are very digital. I'm having Zoom calls. We are having virtual meetings. Oh, we are digital. But come on, that's not digital, right? How is your business model morphed? How is your structure morphed? How is your culture morphed, right? And how is your different services offerings, in terms of your products and services, right? And so, I told my team, come on, I mean, you say, yeah, we are doing coaching, but you're just doing, we're having coaching, but you're doing virtually, right? The actual model itself has not morphed, because, the moment this MCO is lifted, we'll go back to the traditional way. So there's no real digital change. And 90% of the companies are that way, right? Mm-hmm. There is a superficial change because you have to, and then you go back to the old ways, right? But what I'm forcing my team to do is, let's really look at this and say, let's not make superficial changes. Let's actually make transactional changes, which means that when we go back to the norm, this is the new norm, right? The new normal of working has to change. So even this, right? I just had a conversation with my team. I said, look, post MCO, right? We are going to not let you come back to the office. We're going to have team A, team B, initially for a month or so. But then after that, I'm privately saying, maybe we should just close down one of the offices. I got 4 offices, right? I'm just close down one, close another one. I'm like, then we all share, right? If you want to come, you work, but that's a possibility, right? Because it's okay, right? So that's ways of working. But then if you start to look at business model, right? And our webinar series was to create awareness, because the digital business transaction is different. There is a awareness piece. Digital business, we have this digital funnel called IDA, right? You need to create awareness. Then you got to create interest. Then you got to create desire, and then you do the sale, right? You do the final sale, right? But your most of us say, okay, let's do a digital business, and then we want to get to sale without actually creating education, the awareness or the education and the interest, and then the desire, right? So part of the webinar series is also partly, we give it out for free, but I mean, part of it is we are a long-term player, right? We are creating a product called Virtual Learning Interventions, right? VLIs. And we're going to market. We're the first player in the market on VLIs, right? And VLIs are going to be simple, bite-sized, 1-hour interventions, and can be coaching, can be team building. But how do you do virtual team building? It's possible. And we've actually piloted this before MCO. Now we have the opportunity to scale it, right? But we need to create awareness first. We need to create, interest, desire. Because throwing out a product simply, I got a virtual product, and throw, which is what you see every day. You get emails. Oh, we got this virtual, that. I don't understand, because you need to help me connect the dots as a customer. Because I'm also at a point where, as a customer, you're like, I don't know what's happening, right? Anyway, and you're looking at a superficial level anyway. This too shall pass, right? Is the famous quote that's going around everywhere, right? Yeah. So to me, we got to start looking at it. And as a business leader, you need to start looking and say, okay, if my team doesn't believe me, I need to, cordon off 3-4 guys and we work on an experiment. And webinar is one of our experiments. We have others, right? Virtual assessment centers, virtual what we call virtual courses, virtual programs and stuff like that. So that's fine, right? But I think many businesses are looking at it at a purely superficial. And once it ends, we go back to our normal. But what they don't realize is that COVID is just accelerating what's going to happen in the future anyway, right? I mean, if you fast forward 5 years, this is how life is going to be generally, right? So COVID is just accelerating it, right?
It's accelerator, and it's also like, we should take it as an opportunity to do a real digital transformation, as you say, like change the mindset and not just really digitize like one task, right?
Absolutely, and I think one thing good about us is that Malaysia we don't have a really good government, right? So essentially, it's they're there for their own, whatever purpose. And what helps, we know, as business leaders, that you can't depend on the government to save you. You can't depend on the government to come up with ideas. You can't depend on them for anything, right? So you're on your own, which means that you then need to be clever about how you attack the market. You also then realize that, hey, maybe Malaysia is not my only opportunity, because one of the things I found that's very interesting is that I have no problem calling my customer in India and saying, hey, let's meet, and I can have an hour meet with them, and they don't get angry. Previously they say, oh, you never come down to India, why should I give you business? You come down to India, we talk, right? Today, no problem, right? So the good news is that I can access my India market from here, and they don't feel offended, because previously people feel very offended when you don't, you build a relationship and all this, right?
That's really interesting.
I'm going to have a bunch of calls in the afternoon with my Singapore guys. It's like, no problem, right?
Awesome. And I see basically also I see the same, like what's happening with work from home or home office, right? I see a lot of companies that say before, no, there's no way we do that because that never works, and now they're just forced into it, and then they have to do it somehow to make it work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. You have something else? Let me know. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. I think we put an end to this chat. That was really awesome. A lot of learnings. Again, I greatly appreciate your time sharing your experience, your broader experience that you had with leadership. Thank you so much, Roshan.
Happy to. No problem. Happy to. Thanks for the this invite. Appreciate it.
Sure, thanks, and all the best with the company. I'm sure we will see a lot more interesting things coming up. And also, I would like to thank to the audience for watching or listening to this episode. I hope I can see you here or connect with you also next time again. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Have a great day.
All the best. Stay blessed.
Every corner of the world is experiencing disruptions, but not for Bigot, for bringing data skills and knowledge to you. Hence, from leading regional data science show and now international live business virtual event right at your fingertips. Find out more about the future. Bigot 2020, the 8th annual data science show on 22nd to 23rd September 2020.